Welcome to Count the Cost Resource. If we haven't met, I'm your host, Ralph Neighbor, along with
Roger Bird.
At Count the Cost, we exist to resource your vision for the growth of your local church. And today we're going to focus on how to count church attendance online. Roger, we've got a great slate of posts today, guests today, don't we?
Absolutely. It's my privilege to walk us through today, and I'm so glad you're here with everyone. And as Ralph indicated, how to count a church attendance online is our focus today. You know, back before COVID, a year ago, can you remember that? It was easy to count. We just put an usher out there with a Post-it note and said, count the nursery and the children's room, and then go count the youth room. Count every person, even the leaders, you know, who were there, and then count the worship center and leave that in my mailbox in the church office so that we could get it and know what today's count was. Well, now it's a lot more difficult than that. Wouldn't you agree? Today it's different. We still count those who are on land, that is in person, in the room, but we need to also know how to count those who are online. I thought that was cute. I heard someone say that, on land or online. And we need to know who's there, who's on Facebook, who's on YouTube or streaming, if possible, to see how many of our members and guests are engaged with us going forward. It's important for a church and a pastor to know if we're connecting with people or if they're getting dropped between the cracks, if they're engaged with us going forward. And there's several to many ways to know if a person is engaged or if they're disengaging with your church. For goodness sake, we don't want them to disengage. Amen? Okay, today it's amen or oh me. I know I can't hear you, but let me see your voice. Let me see your mouth move. Amen. Okay. So anyway, it's my privilege to introduce our 3 and 4 guests today. Let me introduce them now, and then we'll come back each time and do a short introduction later as they begin to speak. We have with us today Sabina Brady, who is a pastor's wife and chat hostess from Woodward Park Baptist Church. Sabrina, give us a wave. Let us see you out there. Good. And then also we have Corey Smith, the associate pastor of spiritual life at the View Church. And we're so glad Corey's with us. Give us a wave there, Corey. It's good. Thank you so much. And then also the Legible marketing team is here with us today. We've got Maria Price. Good. Hi, Maria. And Dex Alexander. Dex, good to see you, brother. I'm glad you're here. And so we're going to let each of our guests have an opportunity to tell us how it works in their situation or how they see it from their view, and let us know just exactly how they count during COVID or during this online expression. Sabina, unmute your microphone, get in here, and you're first up on the list today, and tell us about yourself and tell us your path there at Woodward Park.
All right. Well, let me start by saying I'm not an authority on this. So Roger just asked me to share what we're doing. And I just kind of got thrown into this role because on March 22nd, we had to go 100% online when the governor shut us down. And so we were just figuring it out as we went. Now, thankfully, we already were broadcasting on YouTube Live. And so it wasn't as difficult to transition for us. But that wasn't something that we really promoted. We really prefer our church members be in person at church, of course. And so we had that available, but it wasn't something that we were really advertising and telling people about. And so we only would have a handful, usually less than 20 on YouTube Live, just for people who were shut-ins or were for missing that Sunday. But it made it a little bit easier transition for us as far as going online. We decided that first week that we would go ahead and add Facebook Live to that. Thankfully, we have great tech people. It was seamless, really easy for them to just add that platform. adding that platform gave us the opportunity to, first of all, there were some people who just really weren't familiar with YouTube. And so Facebook was just an easier platform for them. And then going through Facebook, then people could post it and they could share it and they could host watch parties. And so the word got out. And so actually we had a pretty big crowd right away online. We were kind of surprised. Just because so many churches weren't online yet. They just had to shut down, and they figured they would just be 100% shut down. And again, just for a couple weeks to slow the spread, right? Flatten the curve. And so we had some pretty big numbers right away, but we wanted to be able to count things accurately. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. And of course, things were constantly changing as people became more familiar with the different online platforms. And even during the service, numbers would fluctuate up and down. And so I was there. It was pretty much the tech guys, my husband preaching, my family there. And so I was just figuring it out as we went. So what I decided to do was to get the most accurate count of who was really watching live. Because when it's on Facebook, people could just sort of view it real quick as they're scrolling by, and they're not really stopping, not really engaging, not really watching the whole service. And so we didn't want to count those people as having attended. Our goal was not to have huge numbers. Our goal was to get an accurate count and really know if our church family was engaged, if we were connecting, if everybody was still there. And so what we decided to do was the combined number of Facebook and YouTube at any one time. So I was just there. I had Facebook open and YouTube open, and just watching the numbers, because some people would go on Facebook because they knew how to comment there. So they go on Facebook, say good morning, say hello, but then they would go to YouTube because they really wanted to watch it on their television, and that was easier for them to do it on YouTube. So they would go back and forth, and I didn't want to count them both places. So that's how we started doing it, is just the highest combined number at any one time, rather than the highest number on Facebook plus the highest number on YouTube later. So, and really the live views are what we were counting. And so I encourage you guys, if you want an accurate count, be careful on trying to say, okay, well, we had 150 views on Facebook, so there were 150 people who were watching us on Facebook for this entire sermon. No, a view, they only have to click on there for a short amount of time for it to count as a view. Now, I do know that we had church members who were watching the service at a later time, at a time that was more convenient for them since they couldn't be there in person anyway. But we just decided for us to be consistent, we were going to start one way and we were going to continue, because the most important thing for us was really to see the trend. We knew we would not be able to get a really accurate, specific count of exactly how many people were watching us, because we don't know how many people are watching each screen. But what we wanted to see was the trend. Are people engaged? Are they staying engaged? Are we losing viewers? Are we gaining viewers? And so that to us was important. Numbers are only important for what they can teach us and what they really indicate. And so the numbers weren't super big. We were just watching the trend. So if you think about like the live views, for us, most of our people now are viewing on YouTube. It's just an easier way to watch. So let's say last Sunday, we only have a handful of people who watch on Facebook now. And some people they'll go on Facebook and post the YouTube link on Facebook so that people can just click on the YouTube link and watch it through there. But on Facebook last week, we had 11 people who were watching live. But if I go back and look at last week's sermon, there's 127 views now. So some of those people may have been, just clicking through, scrolling and saw it. And some people may have gone back and watched it later. I don't know. But we're not counting 127 views as people attended. We're counting those live people. Again, for us, we see that as engagement. And while it may be undercounting, that's okay. We just wanted to keep doing it the same way. And so, yeah, we had some from, like, I can look back at December and we have some, December and October, we have things with 350 views on Facebook, 275 views on Facebook. When we had like 10 or 20 people actually watching on Facebook. And so those views aren't really accurate. So I would just encourage you not to think that that's really how many people are watching and being engaged. Now, YouTube is a little bit different as far as the views. You have to intentionally kind of go and select that video. And so for us, I can look at how many people were watching us live. And within a week, the number of views is about 3 times that. And again, I know that we have church members, we have core church members who tell us, well, I'm watching it in the afternoon because I have my grandkids in there in the morning, or, I'm watching it with somebody else. And so we know that there are core church members who are watching it later, but again, we just decided we're going to be consistent and just keep doing that. Now, we do know that we are reaching more people and different people than we were pre-COVID, because we have people who comment, people who maybe they were former church members, or maybe they're just friends of a church member. And so they got introduced to the church through one of the online platforms and have been consistently attending. And so it's been kind of a neat opportunity with COVID, I think. Those first few weeks, like I said, especially when when a lot of churches weren't online yet, actually the first couple months, it was amazing because we had people from all different countries watching, people from all over the United States, a lot of old friends, because they wanted to be watching a church service and their church wasn't prepared to be online yet. And so it's been a neat opportunity to be able to reach a lot of people. Anyway, I'm not sure what all I can tell you. We don't have a perfect formula to offer you. One thing that I did notice as I went back and I looked through the data, I know some people are trying to figure out, how do we count those online screens? How many people should we count as watching? Because we know a lot of them are families watching, or at least a couple watching. And so I went through, now we went back and forth with being open and shutting down. And so, like I said, March 22nd, we went online only, and had really big numbers right off. Things, after a couple months, things leveled out a little bit more. But what I noticed is we went online. So it's May 24th was our last online only service. We opened back up for in-person and online on May 31st. And I've applied this formula to months and months of data. What I saw was if we multiplied the number of screens, live screens, by 2.5, the number is really consistent. So the number that it gave us when we were online only on March 24th, when we went to May 24th, to May 31st, the very next week, when I take the online number of screens, more than half our people came back in person when we opened up in person. When we multiplied those screens by 2.5, it was the exact same number that we had the week before when everybody was online, minus the 10 of us who were in-house. And so applying that formula for the 2 months that we were able to be open in person and be hybrid before the governor shut us back down again. But then when we went shut back down again, applied the same formula and kept going, and the numbers stayed consistent, give or take about 20. So for me, again, that's not how we're counting. We're still just counting the screens. When we count our numbers, we're not multiplying 2.5. But if you were looking for a number that was a good indication for us, that 2.5, as we went back and forth, online only, hybrid, online only again, then we put up a circus tent on our front lawn. When they told us that we weren't going to be able to meet inside, we put up a circus tent outside in the heat of summer in the middle of California fires, and still a bunch of people came back. And that number stayed really consistent. If I were to multiply the screens by 2.5, and then add it to the people who were live, and we were doing a couple services. We did things a lot of different ways, but the number stayed really consistent, give or take about 20 after that level off after the first couple months, when I multiplied the online screens times 2.5. So that's really the best help that I can give you if you're looking for our church, based on our demographic. that worked. Now, your demographic is going to be different than ours. So you may have more families, you may have more groups of 5 or 6 around a screen, or you may have a lot of older people who are watching alone, or a lot of single young people who are watching alone. So the formula may be different for you, but I was really surprised when I went through the data to see how consistent it was when I multiplied the number of screens by 2.5 viewers. So that's what I have to offer you.
That's really good, Sabina. Thank you so much. Now, you said that you do it the same way each week. Once you decided how to count, you just continued counting the same way. Did you have any kind of digital card or sign in or check in with the members?
We didn't, because you just can't get everybody to comment. And we had a lot of people, like, they were excited that they figured out how to watch on YouTube, but they couldn't figure out how to comment on YouTube, or they didn't want to create an account or whatever. So there was a time where we really encouraged people to say hello and let us know they were there. That gives us an idea, because we know the individual people. For me, it's really not about taking roll. That is not my job. I don't normally take roll at all. So we wanted to know which people were there. And it was great because we had a lot of people who had health issues, who were really very isolated during that time. And so for us to see their names, for them to say, good morning, I'm here, people get to say good morning back to them. We knew that they were engaged and still connected. But really, that was just one small aspect of it. Our small group leaders were very innovative and came up with ways for we call them life groups, to be able to still meet on a variety of different platforms. Some of them did Zoom, some do, I just did Facebook Live. Now, again, this actually afforded us some really neat opportunities, because we actually have been, I know for my women's Sunday school class, we've been more engaged during the week than we were pre-COVID, because I have a variety of age groups, but up into older ladies, but most of them, if they didn't have Facebook, I could walk them through getting Facebook. But during the week, we have discussion questions. We have a prayer board that's pinned to the top. So ladies are constantly putting their prayer requests on there, communicating with one another. I post discussion questions during the week. I use their answers from the discussion questions in the lesson on Sunday. And so they're actually more engaged with the leaders and with one another than they were pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's great.
A lot of groups have been that way. So I've really enjoyed having that opportunity. But then the life group leaders, the pastor really reaching out and contacting people,
right,
that tells us if they're engaged, if we're really reaching them. Because
absolutely,
a view on Sunday morning isn't being engaged. I mean, I could watch a televangelist, and not connected to him at all. So our big goal was to remain engaged.
Right. There are other ways of engagement. Thank you, Sabina. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, we're going to get to Q&A a little bit later on, or you can write them in the chat. Let's move on to Corey Smith. Corey, Associate Pastor, a Spiritual Life at the View Church. Corey, unmic and get in here and tell us about yourself and how your church counts.
Sure. So the story of the View Church, obviously, in California last year, everything shut down for us. We were literally in the middle of the conversation of, will we pre-record? Will we go live? Will we pre-record? Will we go live? And it was maybe an hour before choir rehearsal, we got the notice that we couldn't have services. And so we were like, okay, what do we do now? And so we had previously been recording our services to post to Periscope of all things. And I don't know why we ever made that decision, but Periscope of all things. And so there was kind of infrastructure in place for us to do some streaming, but we weren't fully set on that. And so in the course of a week, we decided that we wanted to move over to Facebook Live. And the reason why I wanted to move over to Facebook Live is because that's our largest online audience that we have. And a lot of our members have Facebook. And so we figured that would be the best place to go. And starting that first week, we saw a lot of good things happen, a lot of conversion happen. Like Sabina just said, we had people from different countries tuning in. We had family members tuning in because their church didn't have anything established, and so we were really excited about that. And early on, we found little things to celebrate, like we celebrate views, and we would try and make clear this is not how many viewers we have. This is just how many feeds or timelines that we've reached. And so, we were celebrating the fact that, we're big on outreach and then discipleship, like evangelism, then discipleship. And so we were able to reach more people, potentially reach more people with the message than what our outreaches were doing prior to the shutdown of everything. And so we were celebrating that. We tried to keep making that really clear. But things have kind of progressed as we've gone forward. I'm kind of going through my notes here, and I'll post it in the chat. I put together a little PowerPoint that I have in PDF form. But just to give you background on where we are currently in this online, space, we're mostly online. We have 2 outdoor worship services. We have an outdoor Saturday service, and we just a few weeks ago, we launched an outdoor Sunday morning service. And so we have those 2 services on the weekend. We have 3 online worship services every week on Sunday. That's 7:45, 9:30, and 11:30. We have 6 online Bible studies every week. We have what we call weekly flock calls, which our congregation is broken down between 6 different elders by last name, by the first letter of your last name. And so we have calls where you can call in and talk with your flock leader, your elder, each Monday night. We typically, we're not doing it right now because our pastor's on sabbatical, but we typically have pastor's time. This is what we call pastor's time. It's an opportunity for you just to check in, have a little conversation and prayer with our pastor on Thursday nights, and we do that on Zoom. So we have what I call primary and peripheral platforms. Our primary platform is Facebook. Again, that's our biggest audience. So we want to push the things that we feel like will get the most engagement there. Even if we push it to other places, we want to make sure that it's on Facebook. Then we have our peripheral platforms, which are things like YouTube, Zoom, free conference calls, etc. Zoom is primarily where our Bible studies take place. Free conference calls is where our flock calls take place, and YouTube is kind of our secondary platform. Now, our approach to ministry is to amass the biggest crowd possible, and then convert that crowd to congregation, convert the congregation to core. And core means the people who own the purpose and the mission of the church and, live it out and champion it. And we realized because of that being our approach that numbers are not enough. And so that has kind of pushed the way that we approach numbers. So we don't only look at numbers, but we do take stock of numbers to help inform us. And so with our primary, which is Facebook, we know that any views on a video, Facebook is going to count views as anybody who saw the video for 3 seconds, which doesn't really help you understand how many views that you have, really, if you're trying to get a gauge of how many people are watching. And so we've adopted this algorithm that the Baptist Messenger came up with, which is basically the total minutes of a video divided by the length of the video, and then you multiply that by the average household size in your city. And that's what we use to measure our attendance on Facebook. So any service, that's the method that we apply. We might talk about views. We might talk about average length of watch. We talk about a lot of things like demographics. How many, is it more men or women? Is it more this age group or that age group? But the reason why we find this formula to be beneficial is because you don't know who's watching on that screen that's being counted. It could be a whole family. It could be an individual. They could be watching on a phone, on a television, whatever the case may be. And so we found that this gives us the most accurate picture of how many people are actually watching. And so that's what we use for Facebook for our primary attendance. Now, for our secondary attendance, platforms like Zoom and et cetera. I'm sorry, since I see this question here, I'm just you can access everything that I'm saying via this Dropbox link here in the chat. But our secondary platforms, we kind of use a one-to-one tracking. So for free conference calls, you can get a report of how many people were on the call. For Zoom, you can get a report of how many people were on the call. YouTube is a little less one-to-one. That's a little more complicated. They take views by how many people have watched for 5 minutes. But we do kind of count YouTube as a one-to-one, again, because we don't take numbers as the sole measure of what our reach. And so there's obvious shortfalls to that, right? Because if you want to count Zoom by what you're seeing real time, people come in, they drop off. It's a thing, YouTube is not, a one-to-one views count system. And so because of those shortfalls, what we've opted for is measuring our engagement. So we don't want to just measure views. We do measure views, we measure attendance where we can, but we also want to take with that a mix of what's called our engagement score. And this is particularly what we use for our fit platforms. That's what I call them: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we utilize this formula that Brady Shearer, who is with Nucleus or Pro Church, if you've heard of him, it's a formula for getting an engagement score for any given post that you have on your social media. And what that formula is you divide the engagement, which is likes, comments, shares, etc., by the reach. How many people did it reach? And then you multiply it by 10, and that'll give you an engagement score. And we go by the general rule that an engagement score of 5 or higher is where we want to be. And so when you take those things into account, the attendance numbers, and then you take the engagement numbers into account, it gives you an idea of not only who's watching, but how valuable it is to them. We keep them, for example, on Facebook, we make sure we're mindful of who's sharing the feed week to week, who's measured as a top fan, because whoever's measured as a top fan probably commented on things and shared things, etc. And we also do things to drive up our engagement score on any of our video content. So if you tune into any of our streams, you'll hear our pastor or whoever's preaching, you'll hear them say, type in the comments XYZ, or we'll put something on screen, type this in the comments, because what it does is it drives people to engage. So they'll comment, and that'll drive up our engagement score, but it also transforms them from passive viewer to active viewer. And so that's kind of the deal there. So what we do is we try and maximize our engagement score with our videos by having people like, share, comment, start a watch party. That's actually part of our greeting every week for our service. We invite people to share, text the link, start a watch party. And then throughout, we just try and be intentional to invite them to comment. Like, big thing is tag friends who might need to hear the message or something like that, because that drives up our engagement score. And the more engagement that we get, the more our next post will reach. So if our engagement score is great for, let's say, our 7:45 service, our 9:30 service will reach more people. Does it make sense? And so that's kind of how we go about it. We do take stock of the numbers, but we don't solely rely on the numbers. We look to measure by engagement. So
that's great, Corey. What a good amount of information. I noticed you posted it on the chat. A couple of people are saying that didn't work. The URL that you posted. Would you post that again?
Absolutely.
And
I'll make sure that
we'll make sure we get that. And folks, when you open up your chat, there's a file button at the bottom and 3 little dots. You can save the chat to your personal drive just by clicking Save Chat File. So I do that every now and again, reach over and say Save Chat, and it updates that file in my drive. That way, when we're done, you could go find that and click the links that you want to click. Corey, this moving from crowd to congregation to core is absolutely the part of engagement that we are trying to get people to think about, and not just measure people who view something. I told someone that it's kind of like after church standing on the street and waving at the cars and counting the cars that drove by as being present, because it's a view and that kind of thing. So you don't know who they are, you don't know how they're engaged, and I really appreciate the level of which you are taking this to engagement. Real quickly, is there any criteria other than what you mentioned that you use to engage people and determine if it's a disciple, if they're a disciple, if they're reading their Bible, or if they're giving to the church, or if they're involved in a ministry?
Sure. So what we do is we across the board take numbers and kind of, take this set of information versus this set of information and what trends are we seeing. So we measure how many people are giving each week. We measure how many decisions that we get each week. We've set up basically a decision pathway to where you can text or call or email, and we'll take stock of who makes decisions each week. And so, that's kind of the thing that we do with that. We're looking at refining though. I'm working with a church out here in Atlanta on some of their stuff, and I got a chance to peer in with them, and they're using the church online platform, which I love that platform actually, because it has a lot of pathways to decisions, assimilation, etc. And what it also does is it gives you kind of you get a roster of who's watching, their contact information, at least their email, and you can kind of use that to help further your engagement focus. And so we're looking at doing that, but we're also looking at ways to make our engagement more robust in terms of making our assimilation, our decisions more user friendly and accessible for the online. By no means have we figured this thing out completely, but this is the path that we're on.
Right. There's different levels of engagement, but you're doing the right thing to try to count those who are engaged, because those who are engaged are going to be the ones who return to church when everything gets opened up again. And maybe not everyone will return, but there'll be a level of engagement that demands that they get together with the body of Christ. Thank you, Corey. And I notice people are still saying there's trouble with that. Folks, we'll fix that. We'll get with Corey and get a good link to you. And we have your email addresses if you registered, so I'll be able to send all of that to you. And actually, Corey, you could put your contact information into the chat if you wanted to. Sure. And Sabina, you could do the same thing so that people could contact you if they want. Let's move on to our third group and Legible marketing team. I'd like to bring you guys in together, Maria Price and Dex Alexander, and they have some wonderful things to share with us. Maria, Dex, take it away.
Hey everybody, we're so glad to be here. My name is Maria, as Roger said, and this is my business partner, Dex. He's the founder of our company, Legible. And Legible, we help churches and faith-based organizations get clear about their vision and strategy, and then help equip them with the tools to communicate well and to communicate with clarity. Hence the name Legible. We help you get legible with everything. So we're super excited to be here. Thank you, Sabina and Corey. Really great stuff, really good stuff. And I agree with Corey, the church online platform is great, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the first thing is that it's such an honor to be here, and we should probably acknowledge that counting attendance online, there's no perfect way, and it's pretty complicated. And actually it's not new, right? Even in counting in person, if you have multiple services, like first service and second, do you count the pastor? Do you count the worship team, the choir members? Do you count the volunteers a second time? Do you count the nursery workers? What about the kids that have been, the families of all the volunteers and the staff that have been in there, both services, so it's actually a new thing. And then also, if you're sitting in the service, are you engaging with the message? Are you hearing what the pastor's saying? Are you singing worship songs? Can you actually measure all of those things? Not really. So it's been complicated. And so it's not a new thing when you're online counting. There's really no perfect way. But I love this stuff because metrics and numbers represent people, and people matter. And so stewarding the metrics that we can gain on any of these platforms, any of the insights that we can find, is just a great opportunity for stewardship. I loved what Corey said, the crowd congregation to core as well, Roger, that was really good. And we always start with a good online strategy first. But a couple things, just thinking, I want to like kind of blow up counting attendance as we normally, not try to fit in the, hey, we need to count numbers. Who's actually here? Who's actually engaged? Yes. But there are so many other things that we can begin to count attendance wise that would help us inform our strategy, our programming, how we connect with people, etc. Like all these platforms, for example, multiple streaming platforms is such a good idea. YouTube has 1 billion hours of video that are watched every single day. Every single day, 1 billion hours are watched on YouTube. And then Facebook is such a great tool to stream on, because just like Sabina and Corey said, anytime you as an individual log in to a live stream, it pops up in your feed to anyone who's your friend and says, Mike Lovato is watching. And so you're like, oh, what's Mike Lovato watching? I'm going to click on it. There's a share button. It's just optimized for people in community to engage with. And then the Church Online platform is a tool that is a free tool that is optimized for church online service streaming. And they have programmable things that you can put in the chats. You can engage with people just automatically. And there's a great system for hosting. You can plan ahead. And so if you haven't looked into that free resource, it's a really great resource, the Church Online platform, to use as well. But multiple streamings is really good. But there's so many metrics that you can find just built in on Facebook, YouTube, including the viewership, like they were talking about. Facebook viewership is important to look at, but it's not the great way to keep attendance. I was going to go into that detail, but Corey and Sabina nailed it on that. You want to look at average watch time. How long are people watching? And then you want to look at retention. When are they leaving the service? How long are they staying, and when are they leaving the service? So instead of just who's there, how are they interacting, right? What are they doing? Could that inform your online programming with how long are they staying? There's a significant, like 25 people dropped off at this time. What happened? Why, what could we do to optimize that moment or change, and then you can get male, female viewership. You can get age demographics. You can get location, all these great things to inform your strategy. What if a ton of people are watching in this community in your region? What a great place to put a small group or have someone connect, right? There's so many great metrics to find when you're counting attendance online. And Corey's formula is really good. We have a similar idea. A lot of people do this same thing. They take the highest amount of concurrent viewers in a time frame, and they multiply it by 1.7 to account for the multiple people. 1.7 is actually, if you've ever read Kerry Newhoff's blog, he's like a church leadership expert. He says that a lot of people use 1.7. Sabina uses 2.5, which I think her church is probably like a little bit more family oriented than some might be, like she mentioned. But highest amount of concurrent viewers in a time frame multiplied by 1.7 to account for multiple people. But there's so many options for getting insight to steward for your ministry. So here at Legible, we always start with strategy, because every church has a different, unique vision, a different thing they're trying to do. Some churches want to move to have an online pastor and an online person dedicated to that congregation, if you will. Some disagree with that and think, we just want to get people back in the room. And that's what we're doing. And so you want to decide on your online strategy first. And we have some like statistics that Dex is going to go over to talk about that point that may inform that strategy.
Yeah, I wanted to reinforce the information that Corey and Sabina shared from a technical standpoint. Is so perfect. At a higher level, understanding that the numbers do two things. One, they either they affirm a strategy that you already have in place, or they create the realization that you don't have a strategy in place, and that you do in fact now have people who are engaging somewhat haphazardly, and that should inform especially from an executive standpoint, should inform that a strategy needs to be created and needs to be created soon. We like to say, and many other people have said as well, this isn't new to us, that the period of time, the COVID time was really an accelerant for decisions and thoughts and strategies that probably should have been in place at least a year ago, if not 5 years ago, possibly even 10 years ago. And I've been in church work and was on staff and a church executive for nearly 20 years. And much of the work that I did was trying to gather the data and the information at the congregations that I was a part of, and then filter that information throughout our organization to be able to make wise decisions and to be able to be somewhat predictive, to be absolutely predictive of our behavior and somewhat predictive of other people's behavior going forward. And so there's some numbers that was collected in a recent survey towards the end of last year that were looking specifically at online engagement and the response from the local church. And a few of the numbers jumped out at me. One of them was this, that at the end of last year, churches reported that online viewership was now 12% below pre-COVID in-person attendance. That every church over the course of last year had a big run, a spike immediately, March, Easter, throughout the first part of the summer. And then those numbers started to taper off, to where at the end of last year, the engagement numbers, or the numbers that people were collecting for online engagement, were now 12% below what the previous in-person attendance was over the course of the last year. That number indicates that most churches did not build out a robust enough strategy over the period of time that people were confined to watching online. And as many churches were starting to reopen, the sense that these numbers show, additionally, there's some staffing numbers that show that churches are still staffed for in-person versus online. You start to see those engagement numbers twist, so that now as churches are beginning to reopen, you don't have the same people, that captive audience that was there initially at the start of COVID. Now, there's a number of factors that go into it, not just the church strategy side. There's individual behavior side. There's life changes side. There's people who have had to move out of state because of work, or losing work, or having to go somewhere else for work, or engage with their families, extended family, especially in other places. There's a lot of things that go into attendance and attendance numbers. Me reporting that number is not to slam the church for not taking advantage of an opportunity, as much as it is to say, as we start thinking about numbers now, how we're counting numbers, especially online now, that those things are important to be able to inform behaviors on behalf of the organization, on behalf of the church, as it relates to going forward. Because the sense that now, the sense pre-COVID, and I 100% agree with this sense, that in-person attendance is optimal. It's optimal for relationship building. It's optimal for ministry. It's optimal for traditionally what we consider, corporate worship, the body of believers being together, not forsaking the gathering, the assembling of believers. All of those things are 100% true. That is optimal for people who are in our location, or near our locations. But as Corey pointed out, and as Sabina pointed out as well, as Maria said, if you're able to stabilize and strategize your online engagement, what that does is it actually creates exposure for people who could benefit from your values, benefit from your vision, and benefit from how God uniquely has called you and uses your church to be able to influence and change the world. You are now allowed to expose that outside of the geographic bounds to people who can then self-select and go, I don't live in that area. I can't attend on a regular basis, but I actually am being fed, I'm being influenced, I'm being invited into a relationship in a way that I am not able to in my own particular location. That means it gives you an opportunity now, again, from a strategy standpoint, to be able to help to connect them, to help to build into those relationships. And while an online community is not a substitute for an in-person community, it gives you an opportunity to engage someone that maybe feels that they have not been engaged going forward. So all of this information is great information. The data is great data to be able to capture. And if I were to be able to inspire you to do one thing, it's pick one metric to be able to follow that single metric, and build a strategy based off the information that you are receiving. Meaning if the only metric you can fully rely on is engagement, how many people are liking, how many people are sharing, how many people are passing your information along, figure out a strategy to be able to both acknowledge that people are doing that, be grateful for the people that are doing that, and then help them to be able to do that better. That is good and worthwhile work that you can gain from just some of the information that you get.
That's great information, Dex and Maria. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know there might be many questions. So what you're saying is to, once you decide a strategy on how to count, do that the same way each week.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, when it comes to improving, your metrics and improving the way you count, go ahead and make a change, but then do it that way each week so that you can compare and see the trends and things like that. We've heard that a lot. I'm going to open it up now to anyone who wants to ask a question. We have a few minutes to do this. If you have a question, just unmic yourself, get our attention. We'll try to do it one at a time and see what happens. Okay, who'll go first? If you have a question of any one of our guests, you can name them. Charlie Spielman, you there?
It's a general question, I think, to all of the guests that were talking. I'll start with a statement. I was in a seminar with NOBA, the National Organization of Baptist Associations, last week. And they had presenters from all over the place. One of them was from Glue/Barna. And they listed the 7 best platforms to use or to be engaged with. Mm-hmm. And their number one was not Facebook. In fact, Facebook was way down the line. It was YouTube, at least from the standpoint of reaching people consistently in your community. It was more focused on outreach, not so much on individual congregations. I just wanted to get your opinions on that.
Yeah, YouTube is the second largest search engine next to Google in the world. So people outside of the church in particular, are going to interact with YouTube. I think Facebook is a community engagement tool, like the church community together. But I think I agree with that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. It's optimized for video. You go on YouTube for one thing and one thing only, and that's really to be able to watch. And so as you're presenting services via video, that's one of the best places to do it. It doesn't mean that Facebook doesn't have an importance. It just means, again, strategically, to be able to use Facebook as the tool that it's intended to be used for, of which video is one of those things. Relationship building, commenting, to be able to sort of pull small clusters together and have specific times for them to be together on a platform. Facebook is great for that. And then it's great to be able to take YouTube content and expose it to other people in your circles. So it has a usefulness, but it's a specific tool, like YouTube is a specific tool for all those things.
So that's where the multiple platforms come in. And if you have a church full of Facebookers, you probably have to do that one, and then you want another platform as well. Mm-hmm. That's good. Sure. Who else has a question?
May I just comment on that?
Yeah, Corey, go ahead.
So I absolutely think that multiple platforms is a great thing. The thing that I'll say about YouTube, like I said, we have the crowd congregation core model that we're going with. And one of our principles is we want to build the biggest crowd to convert to the congregation. And my favorite thing to say about that is content creates the crowd. Mm-hmm. So we love to say, okay, well, where are we going to post our services? But what I always like to talk to going to post online. Because being on YouTube and just having your church service, particularly because a lot of churches, we just post our live stream worship service and that's it. We don't chop down to the sermon, which a lot of people are more likely to watch just the sermon because they're not necessarily tuning into the entire worship service, but they will tune into a shorter sermon, especially if it's 30 minutes or less. So that's something to think about. But also, what other kind of content can you add to YouTube to reach that crowd, to reach broader groups? A great example I like to use is I have a pastor friend who operates in a rough area of San Diego, but he has mutual respect with a lot of the gang leaders in the community. And I said, you know what? If you just posted a video where it was pastor talks to leader of the Crips about the community, I would click that video in an instant just because of the title. Just for no other reason than the title. Like, I don't even care how it ended up on my screen. I'm going to click it just because of the title. But that's a way that you can use content to build your crowd.
Amen. I hope that our title got your attention today. I'm glad you were here.
On that, Roger?
Pardon?
Can I follow up on that?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Such a good point, Corey. And to that point, a lot of churches capture what's happening in the room or streaming just to capture the service. But he's talking about like strategic online content to the online community, speaking to the people online, not just, hey, you're viewing what's happening here. And that's a really, really good thing to do throughout the week is target content to the online community as well as really good.
Could I ask a question,
Is there anyone
Roger?
else with a question? I see Jeff Needleman's hand over there and Jay Mills.
Good morning.
We can get both of those guys in.
So my church is in a very rural area with very bad internet connections that we can't count on. So I just recorded and I put up currently on Facebook, on our website, and I just started a YouTube channel. Right now I'm like favoring Facebook. But I guess my question is YouTube or Facebook a better source, a better foundation to be working from?
I think every person probably has might have a different answer. I would say pick one and be consistent. If you already have engagement on Facebook because of relationships, because depending on different areas or age demographics or access to or people who are comfortable with platforms and that sort of stuff. If you already have engagement there, then dig in deep there, build a strategy for there, and really take advantage of the engagement that you currently have. One of the things that is great about YouTube, though, and the reason that you could have two, is YouTube ends up being a good library, a place that you can point people to in the future. It stays up, it's always there, it's always capturing views. You find it in the same place over and over again, whereas searching for a video on Facebook, oftentimes you have to scroll to the day that it was posted and the time and all of that sort of stuff. So having YouTube just as a repository of your information for people to be able to share. Let's say, Jeff, you do a message or a talk about marriage, and you have it, you run it live on YouTube, you capture or on Facebook, you have it captured on YouTube. A month later, when I have a friend who's having a problem with their marriage, I can then just point them to the YouTube channel and go, oh man, we just talked about this and it was really great. Go to YouTube and check it out. So that's a good way of using both of those. Use Facebook for primary, drive your engagement there, but be sure you have a place to point people to on YouTube in the future.
Jay, let's get your question in here.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Roger. So my question, I know it's a different topic, but it's certainly related, is, and Dex, you made a comment with regard to all the churches obviously have been staffed primarily for in-person attendance. And so I guess one of my my long question for a short answer is, as we look to move into this new age, and I've already moved into this new age, I'm looking at what I need to do for restaffing. Where do I begin with something like that? What would be the basic positions if I was going from, if in college vernacular, to 101 to 201 to 401 and so forth?
That's a great question. Just to give the full statistic, churches have approximately one staff person for every 18 people in attendance, and churches have one staff person for approximately every 1,200 online viewers. And so that just shows the difference between the two. Again, I mean, if you're tired of hearing this, I fully understand. But staffing is a result of strategy as opposed to a response to attendance. So developing a key strategy, if the sense is, Jay, that you want to build out online and online engagement as a way of inviting people into your community, then staffing it correctly obviously is a no-brainer. I would say starting with a single person who understands the platforms, quickly knows how to get information online and can capture information and help build out an ongoing strategy for it is probably your first hire. It may not be the most captivating personality on camera. They may not need to be your quote online pastor, but to help to turn your thoughts and your energy and the collective thoughts and energy of the people on your team to turn that into action is probably the very first hire. And then the second thing that I would add is someone who really understands the interconnected, the technology connectedness. And that's oftentimes something that you can contract. They don't have to be on staff initially. You can find somebody in your area to have a quick conversation with and go, look, here's the hardware that we have. Here are the places and what we're trying to do with it. Help us to be able to make those things shake hands. And typically over an hour or 2 hour conversation, those things can all be worked out and it can be upgraded. Finally, the last thing that I would say is that if you're going to go, if that's 101 is getting a person to help turn your thoughts into reality, 201 is finding the person who understands the technology, the 301 or the graduate level version is to be able to find someone who thinks long-term and helps to build the building blocks from here's where we are now to here's where we're trying to go, and then help you and the person who's responsible on your team to be able, who's responsible for the strategy, to be able to help piece all of those things together. Because without that, it just becomes frustrating. It becomes frustrating to put a lot of effort into something that you half understand, don't know why it's not working, can't figure out why the numbers aren't going up, aren't hearing the stories back that I watched you online, then I came to service, and now I've committed my life to Christ, or I'm committed to the core, as Corey mentioned before. To not understand why those gaps are there is very, very frustrating and leads to people throwing up their hands and throwing out thousands of dollars in equipment. So those would be the steps that I would take.
Good. Thank you, Dex. Anybody else want to jump in there?
And let me just say this, Roger. Dex and Maria are not going to say this on this feed, but I'm going to say it for them, that Legible is a great resource for you when you're thinking about this. They are our partner at the California Southern Baptist Convention, and that's why we have them on today. And they would love to hear from you. And you can contact them at maria@legible.org or at the site legible.org, legible.org.
I think we have time for one more question. Was there a hand raised that I didn't see? Anyone? If not, it was a wonderful time to hear from Legible team and Sabina Brady, and also from Corey Smith. Thank you so much for being here today. And this is being recorded. It will be available to you soon. We'll send something to you. It'll also be available at csbc.com under Church Revitalization. Ralph, I'll give it back to you for our closing thoughts.
Well, speaking of content that is capturing, our next special online video event is going to be March 20, and the title is Integrity in a Pornographic World. We all know that with COVID, addiction has shot up so high, and especially in the area of sexual addiction. Russell Willingham is my special guest, and this is not going to be a Zoom event. This is going to be a special online recorded video event that you'll be able to get coming up on March 20. I want to thank all who have joined us today. We want to invite you to become a part of our Count the Cost community. We've got a free assessment and a consultation waiting for you after the show at csbc.com/church revitalization, where you'll
Say that
find
again, Ralph.
What's that?
Say that again.
And maybe it's Maria has put it in the show notes.
Oh,
here.
good. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. It's a free assessment and consultation for you. And so that's at csbc.com/church revitalization. And so you can go online and see that. And we'd love for you to partner with us. I believe with all my heart that the greatest days for the church are in front of us. So go make a change for the best life ever. Thank you so much. God bless you, and have a great Sunday.